On the morning of July 17, 2003, in a remote area of Covington County, Mississippi, local authorities received an anonymous call that would eventually unravel one of the most disturbing cases of familial abuse in the state's history. The caller, whose voice trembled with fear, reported suspicious activity at the isolated Whitfield property, a sprawling 14-acre compound that had remained largely cut off from the surrounding community for decades. The temperature that day had reached a sweltering 94 degrees, typical for a Mississippi summer, as Sheriff's Deputy James Hartman navigated the dusty road leading to the property. What initially began as a welfare check soon transformed into something far more sinister. The Whitfield family had moved to the area in 1974, when patriarch Gerald Whitfield, then 39, relocated his wife Marlene and their 4 children from neighboring Alabama under mysterious circumstances. Public records would later reveal that the family had abruptly left their previous residence following an investigation by Alabama Child Protective Services. The Whitfield compound consisted of a main house and 3 smaller outbuildings surrounded by dense woodland that provided natural seclusion. Neighbors rarely saw the family members in town, and the children were known to be homeschooled. The only regular visitor to the property was a local delivery driver, who described the atmosphere as oppressively quiet and noted that he was never permitted beyond the front gate. When authorities finally gained access to the property that July morning, they discovered living conditions that Deputy Hartman would later describe as medieval. 17 individuals were found residing on the property, spanning 3 generations of the Whitfield family. Among them were 5 children between the ages of 2 and 14 who showed signs of severe neglect and had no official birth records. Medical examinations would later confirm the worst fears of investigators. DNA testing revealed patterns of incestuous relationships spanning multiple generations. In my 27 years of law enforcement, I had never encountered anything of this magnitude, Sheriff Douglas Coleman told reporters at the time. What we uncovered was a family system designed to perpetuate abuse across generations, hidden in plain sight in our community. The case, which became known locally as the Whitfield Horror, began not with a disappearance, but with the discovery of people who had effectively disappeared from society, hidden behind the walls of familial secrecy for nearly 3 decades. If you want to follow more cases like this, that shake entire communities and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to this channel to never miss an investigation. The investigation into the Whitfield family officially began on July 18, 2003, when a multi-agency task force, including the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation (FBI) and local authorities, obtained a comprehensive search warrant for the property. What started as a welfare check had quickly escalated based on the initial observations of Deputy Hartman and the concerning statements made by the younger children found on the premises. As investigators delved deeper into the family's history, a complex web of deception emerged. Gerald Whitfield, by then 68 years old, had masterfully created a system of isolation. Records indicated that the family had moved at least 7 times across 3 states between 1974 and 1989, never staying in one location long enough for authorities or neighbors to become suspicious. Their final move to the remote Mississippi property had provided the perfect setting for complete seclusion. The first significant breakthrough came when investigators discovered a hidden room beneath the main house, containing journals written by Marlene Whitfield, dating back to 1975. These writings, which prosecutors would later describe as chronicles of horror, detailed the systematic abuse within the family and Marlene's own complicity in maintaining the family's secrets. The journals revealed that Gerald had begun abusing his own children shortly after relocating to Mississippi and had established what he referred to as family traditions that normalized incestuous relationships. "We believe he created an alternate reality for these children," explained Dr. Patricia Layton, a forensic psychologist who worked with the victims. "They were raised to believe that their experiences were normal and that the outside world was dangerous. This form of psychological manipulation is among the most severe I've encountered in my career." The investigation faced numerous obstacles. Family members initially refused to cooperate, having been conditioned for years to maintain silence. Older children and adults on the property displayed what experts termed trauma bonding, defending Gerald and the family structure despite their own victimization. Additionally, the The lack of official records for many family members complicated efforts to establish identities and relationships. Perhaps the most disturbing discovery came 6 weeks into the investigation when authorities located a family cemetery on the property. Forensic teams excavated the site and discovered the remains of 3 infants, all of whom were later determined through DNA testing to have been the products of incestuous relationships. Medical examiners determined the causes of death to be congenital defects, consistent with those often seen in children born of close familial relationships. The generational nature of this abuse created a closed system, explained FBI Special Agent Karen Morgan, who specialized in crimes against children. What makes this case particularly troubling is how the isolation allowed the abuse to not only continue, but to escalate across generations, with older victims becoming perpetrators as the family expanded. By October 2003, investigators had compiled over 2,700 pages of evidence documenting abuse spanning from 1974 to 2003. The case grew more complex as investigators realized that clear distinctions between victims and perpetrators were increasingly difficult to establish among the middle generation who had grown up in this environment and later continued the cycle with their own children. As the investigation entered its 6th month, crucial breakthroughs emerged that would fundamentally change the trajectory of the case. In December 2003, Laura Whitfield, Gerald's eldest daughter, who was 43 at the time of the discovery, finally broke her silence. After months of specialized therapy and protection guarantees from prosecutors, she provided testimony that shed light on the origins of the family's disturbing practices. Laura revealed that the family's relocation to Mississippi in 1974 had been precipitated not only by investigations in Alabama, but by similar inquiries in Ohio before that. The pattern of abuse, she explained, had actually begun with Gerald's own father, making this a case that spanned not 3, but 4 generations. She described how Gerald had systematically isolated each new location, gradually cutting off communication with the outside world and establishing strict rules about family loyalty. "My father called it keeping the bloodline pure," Laura told investigators in a recorded testimony that would later prove crucial in court. "He believed that outsiders would contaminate our family, and he used religious texts, twisted beyond recognition, to justify his actions." Laura's testimony was corroborated when authorities discovered a hidden storage unit in Hattiesburg rented under a false name. Inside were documents dating back to 1968, including altered birth certificates, financial records showing how Gerald had managed to operate entirely in cash for decades, and photographs documenting the family's history of abuse. Most disturbingly, investigators found journals written by Gerald himself, outlining his philosophies about genetic purity and detailed plans for continuing these practices across generations. DNA analysis completed in February 2004 created a comprehensive family tree that shocked even veteran investigators. The results confirmed that of the 17 people living on the property, 13 were directly involved in incestuous relationships, either as victims, perpetrators, or both. 5 of the youngest children were revealed to be both the children and the grandchildren of Gerald Whitfield. Dr. James Forrester, the geneticist who oversaw the DNA analysis, noted, "The genetic entanglement in this family is among the most complex I've encountered in my career. Several of the younger children exhibit genetic abnormalities consistent with inbreeding depression, including developmental delays and congenital defects that will affect them throughout their lives." Perhaps the most significant revelation came from Sarah, one of the teenagers who had been born and raised on the compound. After months of specialized therapy, she revealed the existence of other Whitfield family compounds in neighboring states. This information led to coordinated raids in rural areas of Tennessee and Arkansas, where authorities discovered similar situations involving extended family members who had branched off from the main family unit but continued the same practices. What we initially believed was an isolated case revealed itself to be a sprawling network of abuse, District Attorney Margaret Hamilton explained. The Whitfield case demonstrated how a determined perpetrator could exploit rural isolation and systemic gaps in child protection to create intergenerational cycles of abuse. Leave in the comments, "Truth at any cost," if you believe every victim of such terrible abuse deserves justice, no matter how many years have passed. The Whitfield case finally went to trial in October 2004, after 15 months of intensive investigation. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Hamilton, faced the monumental task of presenting evidence spanning 3 decades while protecting the dignity of the victims. The trial lasted 11 weeks and included testimony from over 60 witnesses, including family members, medical experts, psychologists, and investigators. Gerald Whitfield, then 69, was ultimately convicted on 87 separate charges, including sexual abuse of minors, incest, physical abuse, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. On March 17, 2005, Judge William Foster sentenced him to 427 years in prison without the possibility of parole, effectively ensuring he would spend the remainder of his life behind bars. In his sentencing statement, Judge Foster declared, "In my 30 years on the bench, I have never encountered a more deliberate, calculated campaign of familial destruction. The court cannot undo the generational damage you have caused, but it can ensure you never harm another child." Marlene Whitfield, who prosecutors proved had been both victim and enabler, received a 35-year sentence after pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for her testimony. 4 adult children, who had continued the cycle of abuse with the 3rd generation, received sentences ranging from 15 to 60 years. The case's resolution extended far beyond criminal sentences. The youngest victims faced years of specialized therapy and rehabilitation. 3 of the youngest children with the fewest psychological attachments to the family were eventually adopted by carefully selected families trained in trauma-informed care. The others remained in specialized therapeutic foster care facilities, their progress closely monitored by a team of psychologists dedicated to their case. The Whitfield case resulted in significant changes to Mississippi's child protection laws. In 2006, the state legislature passed the Whitfield Act, which strengthened reporting requirements for isolated children, expanded the authority of Child Protective Services to investigate homeschooling families when red flags are present, and established new protocols for cross-state coordination in child abuse investigations. The property where the abuse occurred was eventually seized by the state, the structures demolished, and the land converted into a nature preserve. A small memorial stands at the entrance, dedicated to the resilience of survivors of family violence, though it makes no specific mention of the case that inspired it. 20 years after the discovery, the impact of the Whitfield case continues to reverberate through both the justice system and the lives of those affected. Some survivors have gone on to become advocates for child protection reform, while others have chosen to completely disconnect from their past and their biological family. Dr. Layton, who continued to work with several of the survivors for many years, noted in a 2023 interview, "What makes the Whitfield case so profoundly disturbing isn't just the nature of the abuse, but how effectively social isolation was weaponized to perpetuate it across generations. Rural communities across America continue to struggle with detecting and preventing similar cases." The last court proceeding related to the case concluded in 2018, when one of the now adult survivors successfully petitioned to legally change her entire identity and have her records sealed, a final attempt to disconnect from a history she had never chosen. Sheriff Coleman, who retired in 2010, reflected, "The Whitfield case fundamentally changed how we approach isolated families in rural communities. The signs were there for decades. Children never enrolled in school, families that never integrated into the community, individuals without official documentation. We just didn't recognize what those signs meant until it was too late for so many victims. If you've watched this far, it's because you care about these cases that leave permanent marks on families. Leave a comment saying, 'I watched until the end, so I can get to know you and understand who truly cares about the search for truth.' Please like this video and share it with others who believe in the importance of understanding how these tragedies happen so we can prevent them in the future. Subscribe to our channel for more investigations that shed light on cases that challenge our understanding of human behavior and the systems designed to protect the vulnerable.